So Matt and the boys and I had the opportunity this past week to be out at Grace Point. And if you're not familiar, Grace Point is the camp and retreat center here in the Diocese of East Tennessee, located just about an hour away on Watts Bar Lake near Kingston. And Matt and I served as the deans for this session, which essentially means that we ran the morning formation program. And so we did that each morning. And it's our third year serving as deans, and with everything going on in this season in our lives, there was every reason this year not to be out at camp. Every reason. But the Holy Spirit was keeping another list of reasons, the ones that said that we needed to be out at camp, and as always, I am grateful for the discernment of the Spirit. It was a good week, Luke, right? Yeah, thumbs up. And I know I think we have Griffin and Eva and Brooke out at Grace Point currently, which is fantastic. So glad to be out there, grateful for the gift of Grace Point, and especially grateful for the way that the Holy Spirit moves and teaches me through the campers each year. And this year in particular, these 4th through 6th graders were always a step or more ahead of where Matt and I thought we were planning and leading the program. We did not have to strain or stress to make connections or wonder if these young people were engaged. So we designed the formation program around the desire God has for all living things to thrive, for all living things to have what we called the bare necessities. And yes, we did play the Jungle Book song and invite singing and dancing. So the bare necessities. And we asked the campers on our first day what they thought might be included on this list of bare necessities. And the way we framed that question was to say, if you were stranded on a desert island, or if you prefer a remote forest, what would you need to survive? And we heard great responses that we were anticipating to help lead us into the next part of the program. Responses like shelter and food, air and water. And yes, we did get some responses of beach chairs. And maybe surprisingly, we only had one tech gadget response, and it was a very practical one, a GPS. Not the full phone, the GPS. And we also heard tools and fire and medicine and even bug spray. But there was more. The campers responded that if stranded, they sure hoped they weren't stranded alone, because other people are also a bare necessity. Community is something vital to our wellness and our wholeness. So much so that the campers responded that other people would be ideal, but if other people were not possible, then at least some other of God's creatures. A desert island dog for companionship. So these campers, this is what they did. They stayed right ahead of us, because we had planned for community to be the theme, the bare necessity that we talked about on the last morning of camp. But here these young people were naming it on day one. They knew. And not only community. We didn't end or stop there. These campers named that if stranded, hope would be a bare necessity, a motivating force of survival and care. And again, this was hour one, day one. And so as we reframed the question from what do you need to survive on a desert island to what are the things that God desires for all living creatures, we had quite the list. All of the things that we know are necessary to life, that God desires shelter for all of us from the dangers of the world, that God desires food to nourish us and clear air and clean water, to sustain and hydrate us. And then God also desires for us a community of hope. Because in the beginning, God created community. It was not good for Adam to be alone. Adam needed other people He needed Eve. And when Jesus began his earthly ministry, even though he had all the power and the fortitude in the world to go it alone, he chose to call a community into being. Fishermen left their nets and tax collectors their booths. Women traveled from as far as Magdala to join the Jesus-following community, a community of belonging and care. The campers last week could name the needs of community and hope because they experienced both of these at Grace Point. Hopefully they know community and hope in other places, but definitely at Grace Point. They know what it is to be drawn together by the Spirit as God's family, to learn and laugh and play and eat and sing as fellow children of God. And that brings us to today's gospel from Mark. We hear some words from Jesus, quite a few actually, and they're provocative. When Jesus is told that his mother, brother, and sisters are outside asking for him, he responds, "Who are my mother and my brothers?" And then gesturing to the crowd that's gathered around him, Jesus continues, Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother." And maybe Jesus wouldn't put it quite this way, but since I'm still a little bit in camp mode, are you still a little bit in camp mode, Luke? A little bit? Yeah. Whoever learns with me, whoever laughs with me, plays with me, eats with me, whoever sings with me in the power of the Spirit is my family. And yes, there is tension in today's gospel story between Jesus and his mother and siblings. Jesus is at home, and it can be a hard thing to return home. Jesus is teaching and healing, and all of those who have always known him, and maybe especially in this part of the world, we can imagine this, right? All of those who have always known him. The "honey, I remember when your mama was pregnant with you. She got on that donkey and took off for Bethlehem." Or the "Jesus, when I look at you, I picture you and you're that tall." All of those who have always known Jesus, always known him, are having a hard time reconciling their memories of Mary and Joseph's son with the teaching and healing Son of God that is now before them. They think Jesus is crazy, that he is out of his mind, and so Jesus' family does what families do. They go out to protect, to restrain Jesus, and also probably to protect themselves from the Nazareth rumor mill, fear of guilt by association with the crazy hometown boy. And as they frantically search for their son and brother, Jesus redefines family. The work of the Spirit calls family into being. The work of the Spirit ignites hope that transcends blood and tribe. We know that Jesus' mother will go on to walk with him all the way to the cross, but on this day, and in this moment, when Jesus' family is not walking with him, he lets it be known that he is not motherless, that he is not without siblings, that the Spirit is calling a community, a family, into being just as the Spirit has since the beginning. And those words may sound harsh, especially if you're standing there as Jesus' mother and siblings. But those words are also comforting. Words from Jesus that say, even when our families of origin fail to be a place of belonging and care, we still have a family. We have a community where we will know parents and siblings, and most importantly, where we will know and experience hope. We are all children of God, and we belong. The campers last week knew this. We need other people. Sometimes those people are our parents and siblings that we've grown up with, and sometimes those people are the family of God that the Spirit has called together. In communities like the one we know here at Good Sam and the community out at Grace Point. We are all God's children, and we belong. And there are so many forces in the world that would like for that not to be true. Loud and strong voices of fear and exclusion. And to that point, Jesus tells a parable today. But no one, Jesus says, can enter a strong man's house and plunder his property without first tying up the strong man. Then indeed the house can be plundered. It's okay if you had a quizzical eyebrow kind of raise at this point, because these are more provocative words, and they're curious because in this parable, Jesus is the one doing the plundering. Jesus is the one who has the loud and strong voices of fear and exclusion tied up. He has them tied up in garlands of love and grace and reconciliation. Jesus is the one plundering the world, and he's plundering the world with peace and forgiveness, stealing the world back so that all of God's family can thrive, so that all of God's family can have the bare necessities. This is our hope, and we know and we experience it in community. Thanks be to God.